Hello, class. I am back. My voice is ever so slightly better. The library is the same, different stripy shirt. But I would like, this is CC Warm, hi. I would like to just give you a small taste of a point that I want to make about a couple of things. So in this wee video, I will say a few things about Pottermore and give you a brief tutorial about etymologies and using the Oxford English Dictionary. It's many of you will already know this, but for those of you who are new to EIU or who are off campus and don't realize how much you can access through the Booth Library website, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a valuable tool that you can access since you are registered as a student at Eastern Illinois University. First, about Pottermore. And this will sound like it's a criticism of Pottermore, and in some ways it is. In it sort of plays into what our reading for this week, Jack Zipes, calls the phenomenon of Harry Potter. And it's not exactly the same as many of the fan sites, as Becky pointed out in one of her comments to the things, and it certainly is. It certainly can be a lot of fun, or at least I imagine it can be a lot of fun, having not actually spent a lot of time there. But and it certainly can be used as a valuable resource for finding out things that J.K. Rowling herself has written about her novels, and other folks have written about that. But I do want to argue a little bit against an over reliance on believing that what the meaning of a text can be found or discovered in what an author says about it. What I want to say by that is that the meaning of Harry Potter or the Harry Potter novels, or even any chapter or paragraph or even a word in one of the novels, that those are going to be loaded with J.K. Rowling's intention. That's true, but at the same time, I also want to point out that meaning is also loosened from her grip the moment it kind of is released out into the world. The very moment when she publishes those words and they come out into the world, they become part of the language economy or the language ecology that we all inhabit, and she no longer has full control over those, regardless of intention. As we read the novels, we produce the meaning of those words for ourselves. And meaning is, in this sense, it's a discovering by reading, a negotiation between an authorial intention on the one hand and how we create meaning out of those words on the other. But both author and reader are also limited or circumscribed by the logic of language itself. Neither the author nor the reader can make the words mean something other than what a larger community of speakers has sort of over time determined what those words mean. Now, I'm not sort of arguing for one meaning of a particular word. What I am arguing against is sort of the fact that an author or a reader can determine what a word is sort of just by force of will. I'll give you a silly example. If I write the word squirrel, but I'm intending it to mean raccoon, it really isn't going to mean a lot that I intend it to be raccoon. As soon as a reader picks up the book and reads the word squirrel, they're going to think squirrel. And they're not going to have any idea that my intention was really to convey the idea of a raccoon. And the same thing would go if a reader sees the word squirrel and idiosyncratically decides that squirrel really does refer to raccoon and thinks the entire time reading the word squirrel that what's really meant is raccoon. That reader is going to have a pretty hard time convincing others that that's an accurate sort of interpretation of what's written on the page or what's even being said to him or her. So what I'm trying to get at, that's a silly example and an extreme example, but what I want to try to say is that I can be rather skeptical sometimes about what authors say about their own works and about the meanings of their own texts. And I often think that readers can have a better idea of what texts are doing and what meanings are being produced in those texts than the author themselves do. So I guess what I'm really getting at is that I think texts participate in the interplay between authors and readers and language itself. But I would hesitate to look at what J.K. Rowling has said and take that as the be-all and end-all of what the words or the names or anything about Harry Potter really means. And now her intention might have been to have a certain thing. So what I wanted to do is to take a look at Becky, whose wonderful post on Dudley Dursley's name is up. And there's a quotation that she uses from J.K. Rowling herself. I'll try to boot this up on my computer so I can look at it. And what she says is that, and this is from J.K. Rowling herself, from Pottermore, writing about the name Dursley. The surname Dursley, this is taken from Becky, thank you Becky, Becky's text. The surname Dursley was taken from the eponymous town in Gloucestershire, which is not very far from where I was born. I have never visited Dursley, and I expect that it is full of charming people. It was the sound of the word that appealed, rather than the association of the place. Okay, so she chose, the intention was simply, it was an arbitrary on her part. She just chose it not because of anything to do with the town in Gloucestershire, but because she had a negative association with that. And that's all well and good. And I thank you, Becky, for having pointed me to that particular quotation, that particular writing of J.K. Rowling about her own choice of Dursley. But I wanted to go a little further with that and look at, well, what is it about the word or the name Dursley that has something of a negative connotation to J.K. Rowling's ears, and whether that's not sort of a typical or something that we can all agree on as speakers of the English language, that there's something about that word that sounds harsh in some way. So the way I wanted to do that was move towards this resource that we have at EIU on the Booth Library website called the Oxford English Dictionary. Now, one thing I would like to say is that going forward, I would totally recommend the use of the Oxford English Dictionary because it is sort of the accepted resource for looking at not only definitions of words, but also the histories of words. And the history of word is the study of etymology. Also in the Oxford English Dictionary, you can find examples of usages of words in the various meanings that they have. So, how do you get there? Let's start here on the EIU homepage, where you can discover all the various adjectives that EIU's marketing gurus have determined will help market our fair institution: challenging, collaborative, inspirational, engaging. And up here in the top corner, near the D2L link, you'll find the library. You can click on that and scroll down to the library homepage until you see a drop-down menus for books and movies, articles, and here you find Explore by Subject. If you click on that, you will discover links to all sorts of disciplines of study, including literature and drama. When you click here, you will discover a page curated by the lovely and talented Karen Whistler, very nice woman. She provides you with all sorts of links for useful databases. Just in passing, the most useful ones are the JSTOR, the MLA, and the Project Muse. And if you scroll down, the Oxford English Dictionary. When you click here, if you are not on campus, you will have to provide your EIU username and password, the same ones you use for your email. But since I was already logged in, I skipped that step and went straight to the OED database. Now, this is where I wanted to show you how you might do some research for your name and word essays. And I wanted to use Dursley as my example. You could say to yourself, silly teacher, Dursley's not a word, and you'd be right, but just like Dudley has dud, maybe Dursley has durs. Worth a shot. Worth a shot. Let's look up durs. What do we find? No durs. But there's a dura, as in dura mater, which means hard, hard matter. And if we read it through, we can see that dura comes from the same root as a meaning of the word doer, doer. So we can play around and do some research, and we discover that not only does the word dur mean hard, both literally and figuratively, and I can show you some of that here. You click on dur, and then you discover that you have various meanings, as you can see here. And if you click on one of the top meaning as an adjective, you'll find that it means hard, both literally and figuratively. But also that etymologically speaking, dur comes from the same origin as dour, a word that suggests hard, severe. Here we go with dour, hard, severe, bold, stern, fierce, hardy. So we're more interested in the severe sort of things. But perhaps most importantly, hard to move, stubborn, obstinate. Now, some of you may be familiar with the word obdurate, which basically means resistant to persuasion or hard-hearted. And I would argue that for this series of connotations, hard, stubborn, stern, pig-headed, hard-hearted, accurately articulates the primary characteristics of the Dursleys, the kind of people who would find comfort in a wall and who resist new ideas and outside influence. So even though you might not think of Dursley or Durs as meaning anything, there is an entire constellation of words in the English language drawn from the root durus, meaning hard, that would inevitably lead the ears of an English speaker to hear a resistant hardness in the word durs, or the sound durs. Now, whether J.K. Rowling knew all this when she chose the name Dursley really doesn't matter. There's an internal logic to the English language that she tapped into, consciously or unconsciously. And whether you, dear student, reflect on this fact with awareness and go through the process of trying to determine exactly why it is that Dursley sounds harsh and maybe grating, maybe somewhat stubborn, or maybe somewhat resistant to change, whether you do that or not is up to you. But I think that the OED provides you at least a tool where you can start to discover things about words that you didn't know. I'm going to include in the underneath this video on the WordPress site a link to a podcast on etymology that I and a colleague, Chris Hanlon, did a few years ago. And it'll help to explain more about how etymologies work and how you can look things up and why etymologies are particularly interesting in English, since we have basically a larger pool of historical sources for English than the average language might have. So I'm going to stop here and leave you to it.